actually necessary in your graphite drawings. In this drawing challenge, I will be doing a self-portrait of me with no drawing, with no blending whatsoever. It'll all be based on my pencil pressure. Let's find out. Currently, I've been working on a major project, a self-portrait project, but one of the main steps to getting to the self-portrait was doing a graphite sketch. Now, this is a graphite observational, not representational sketch of me that I've done in graphite that I'm about to work on, but throughout this drawing, I'm not blending at all. So this is different from my conventional drawings because normally I would blend. And I'm going to talk to you through the pros and cons about not blending, and this is actually a challenge, so I'm not smudging at all in this drawing process. And it'll really challenge you to pay attention to your values and how hard you press on the paper. Do you really need blending stumps or tissue or something to blend out your graphite when you're creating graphite art? The answer is actually yes and no. Blending stumps can actually make drawings look finished and blurry, so if you want a smooth texture like skin, this can be very helpful, but it can also take away realism if you don't know how to use them correctly. For example, if you blend out too much, it can make your drawing look flat and dull, but it can also enhance your drawing by creating gradient value changes, so that's something important to keep in mind. Also, I would not recommend using fingers to blend. In this drawing, I did not use any fingers, because your fingers have oils on them. Even if you just wash them, they still always have some natural oil, so if you put that on the paper, it'll kind of give it a greasy look, so you don't want that on your drawing, assuming you want to look realistic. So throughout this drawing, I'm not using any blending whatsoever, so this is a challenge for me because I've never done this really before, and you'll see how I'm starting very lightly because I don't want to press hard on the paper, because it's hard once I press hard to make it smooth. So I do lots of layers, but very light layers, and I layer them on top of each other and gradually get darker and darker. So I start from light to dark, and you'll see me do this through the drawing. Started this drawing kind of ahead of time, actually, before I made the video. I have most of the face, the basic features of the face sketched in already, so you might see that, but things will change as I progress throughout the drawing. Right now I'm working on the clothing, and the clothing is a part of the background, or it's in the foreground actually of this drawing, but it's definitely not the main focal point, so I don't want to focus too much time into it, but I definitely want to make sure I get all the creases and folds so it looks observational rather than representational to my actual reference that I'm using. When I'm layering the colors down, instead of using hatching motions, I use circular shading motions. I find with circular shading motions you can get a very smooth and gradient result, and this is what we want when we're not blending out with blending steps. We want to look very smooth and natural and gradient. Now obviously with the hair, I'm not going to use this technique because in the hair I'm going to use directional lines that go in the direction that the hair is going. As you can see right here, my hair is kind of pushed off to the side, as you can see, so I'm using lines that go in the direction that the hair is naturally flowing in rather than circular shading. But throughout the whole skin I'll be using circular shading, and you can see I try to keep it very light-handed. I found out that when I draw in my older drawings, I've been kind of heavy-handed, and this has made unrealistic results, and I haven't been able to get the what I wanted it to look like when I've gone too dark at the beginning. So I highly recommend that you go light and then you gradually get darker and darker, and this will give it a very gradient and natural flowing look to the piece. A lot of people don't realize that the paper is so important when you're drawing. In this tutorial I actually used, I didn't use the type of paper I normally use. I usually use Bristol smooth paper or Bristol vellum for portraits. I use this because it's smooth and it allows me to create a nice result. I don't have to apply too much pressure, so that's really important when you're using graphite or colored pencils. You don't want to apply too much pressure, and especially if you apply too much pressure in graphite, it'll give something called a shine, And something I feel like could have been better on this drawing, if I look back and critique it, it's very important to critique your own drawings, because when you critique your own drawings and self-critique, it allows you to improve and reflect upon what you've done. So in prior drawings, you're less likely to make those mistakes, and it just helps you learn and become a better artist. So for example, I would probably not press too hard in some areas, because when you press too hard, it makes it look shiny at the top. And I know there's some ways to get around this, like by using like a graphite, or by using like charcoal for the darkest and like a black colored pencil. But if you're just using graphite, I would just try to not press as hard as much as possible. If an area is really dark, then you do have to press hard, but try as much as not to press super hard, because it kind of takes away from the realism. And I'm just kind of working on the clothes, and I'm going in the direction that the clothes are going in. And circular shading really does help with the skin and with the eyes, and I'm making sure that the eyes look proportionally and atomically correct. Atomically correct to the rest of the body. One thing I noticed that was definitely a challenge when I was working on this was getting in the background, trying to make it look smooth, since since the shadow was very subtle. I didn't want to press hard at all. I didn't want to press hard, but it was dark, so I did want to press hard. But I felt like if I pressed too hard, it would make it look unrealistic and not smooth like it actually is. So I did light pressure, but then I did press hard. But I try to make it look kind of gradual. As you can see, as my drawing progresses, I kind of continue. I keep tweaking things that I'm not quite happy with. It's really important to just keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking things until you're finally happy with it. Realistic drawings take a very long time. This took me quite a few hours, actually. This is not my final piece, actually, so it only took me about probably 4 hours, probably 3 or 4 hours, which actually is pretty fast for realistic drawing. Most drawings take me 8 to 10 hours, I would say, but this has gone a little bit faster. But as again, it's just a graphite drawing that's observational. Major things to take away from this is that you don't really technically need blending stumps to create realistic drawings, but they can definitely be very helpful. And I think that this challenge really allowed me to really focus on my values and how hard I'm pressing on the paper, because I find that I'm naturally heavy-handed, so this really challenges me to be more light-handed and really preserve the paper as much as possible, so I can add more and more layers on it. So that's really helpful with graphite. And it also challenged me to avoid the shine as much as possible, so I didn't get really dark shadows. Really shiny shadows. Listening, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you have any questions, comments below. Feel free to tell me what your experience is on blending, and if you actually need blending stumps in your drawings, or if you need to be using smudging at all to get these value gradations. Bye, everybody.